Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It was soon after Theresa May left the White House on Friday that Donald Trump signed the executive order banning citizens from 7 majority Muslim countries. President Trump's 90-day ban covers Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Yemen and Syria, from where refugees are banned until further notice. Donald Trump's executive order also imposes a complete ban on all refugees coming to the US for the next 120 days. Mr. Trump said that the ban would keep radical Islamic terrorists out of the United States of America. But the ban has sparked protests across the US as people affected and already in the air were detained at US airports. US lawyers have begun legal action to challenge the ban, which many believe is unconstitutional. At a press conference in Ankara, Turkey, Theresa May was asked about the refugee ban 3 times before giving this response.
Well, the United States is responsible for the United States policy on refugees. The United Kingdom is responsible for the United Kingdom's policy on refugees. And our policy on refugees is to have a number of voluntary schemes to bring Syrian refugees into the country.
Downing Street later issued a statement saying immigration policy in the United States is a matter for the government of the United States, but we do not agree with this kind of approach, and it is not one we will be taking. This morning, Treasury Minister David Gauke was asked why Theresa May had refused to condemn the travel ban at yesterday's press conference.
The Prime Minister is not a shoot-from-the-hip type of politician. She wants to see the evidence. She wants to understand precisely what the implications are. She'd been in a series of very lengthy meetings with President Erdogan, and she is someone who wants to see the briefing and understand it, and then will respond to that. And I think there are times where there's always pressure to respond within a news cycle and so on. The important thing is we are saying that we disagree with it and we do think it's wrong.
David Gauke. We're joined now from North London by the Conservative MP Heidi Allen. Heidi Allen, welcome to the programme. Should the government in general and Theresa May in particular be more vocal in their criticism of Donald Trump's travel bans?
Well, as David just said, it's obviously entirely right that Theresa has now come out and said that this isn't appropriate and not something we agree with in our government. But I do wish she had said something at the time, not least because it affects our own citizens, one of our own MPs, Nadim, for example, but also because the refugee crisis is a global crisis. And given that she had built clearly an excellent relationship with Donald Trump and had convinced him that NATO was the right thing to support, I felt she had the relationship and the strength of relationship that she could have been firmer at the time.
Can I just point out that Mrs May hasn't said any word of criticism about the travel bans. She refused to say anything 3 times in Ankara, and it's merely an anonymous Downing Street spokesperson that has issued the subsequent mild criticism. We've not heard from the Prime Minister at all on this matter in terms of criticism.
No, but the spokesperson, of course, will be speaking with her blessing, so clearly it is something she has, acknowledged. But, as I said before, I wish she'd said something at the time. The global climate at the moment is very delicate, and we need our leaders to be working together to address things like the refugee crisis. And I think, potentially, as David Gauke also said this morning, this plays potentially into the hands of Daesh. It's absolutely not the right message we should be sending.
What would you like the Prime Minister to say?
Well, I would rather, as with any new relationship, it's about testing the boundaries, isn't it? And they clearly had got on very well, so she should have felt braver, in my opinion, to say something there and then. I would have preferred her to say, for example, well, clearly I need to talk to Donald Trump about this. It's not something I would support in the UK, and I want to understand why, because I believe there's a better way to deal with this, this terrorist threat, and I would have liked her to suggest that she would engage with him to do that.
The President has instituted a 90-day ban, a temporary ban, on people coming from 7 mainly Muslim majority population countries. These 7 were on President Obama's list as considered the biggest terrorist threats to the United States. Mr. Trump wants this temporary ban until he puts tougher vetting procedures in place. What's wrong with that?
Because it appeared to me that it wasn't thought through at all, and it was affecting ordinary, regular citizens, some of our own British citizens. It can't be right that a man, a president in that position of influence and power, can just arbitrarily come up with executive powers like that. I mean, it's already been challenged by his own courts. So, it's not the measured, thoughtful, considered approach I want to see in a global leader.
Who is going to, do you believe, will be hurt by this, given that there can be exceptions on a case-by-case basis?
Forgive me, Andrew, I didn't catch the first part.
Who do you believe is going to be hurt by this, given that there are exceptions on a case-by-case basis?
I think potentially, our global reputation is going to be hurt like this. The desperate people, I've been to the refugee camps myself in Europe. The desperate people trying to flee persecution are going to be hurt by this. We're trying to heal the wounds in our community in this country, not only because of Brexit. This is a time of coming together, not about saying it's okay to discriminate against, race and religion in this way. It's not acceptable.
Do you believe that Mr. Trump's state visit should go ahead?
Well, he is the leader of America, so yes, it does need to go ahead, and we need to learn to work with him, and I believe Theresa has started off in a very positive manner being able to do that. She just needs to continue in that vein. And if he comes to our country, he needs to respect the way that we feel about things. But yes, he is the president, so like it or not, he does need to come to the UK. Where he speaks to us, there's some debate within Westminster as to where it's appropriate for him to speak and to MPs, but it is right that he comes.
Well, if he does come on a state visit, should he be granted what this country has always thought of as a great honour, which is a joint address to both Houses of Parliament?
And, I haven't been an MP long enough to understand the protocol of where is the right location for him to do that, but it has been, I believe in the past, the greatest leaders, when they have achieved great things globally, it's Westminster Hall. But there's already a number of us, MPs, Alistair Burt, Sarah Wollaston, saying that that's not the appropriate place for him, and I'm inclined to agree with them.
So you don't think he should be accorded that privilege of speaking to a joint session of Parliament?
I think that there are places where he can do that, but perhaps Westminster Hall yet is not the right place.
All right, Heidi Alexander, thank you for joining us this morning. Heidi Allen, sorry, I should say. Heidi Allen, thank you for joining us.
No problem.
Steve, within 24 hours, we have seen the difficulty of becoming Donald Trump's best friend. That on the one hand, it could have huge advantages, particularly for a Brexit Britain. On the other hand, if you are going to be his best friend, you then have to give a running commentary on every major thing he does.
Yep. And we've learnt a bit about Theresa May, that when she has to produce a set-piece speech, which she has time to prepare, she can get it tonally right, and sometimes more than right. When she is faced with a fast-moving story, she is leaden-footed and can't think quickly on her feet. And so you have we know, did she regret now not saying more? Evidently she did, because we got a statement with her, not her as you pointed out, but a Downing Street spokesperson saying more. So she can't think quickly, and she's going to have to think very, very quickly in response to some of the things he's going to be doing, because she's going to be asked about it all the time. And I think does highlight the wider danger that the assumption that this special relationship is always a safe, fertile place to be has been proven wrong before, and I think it's going to be proven wrong big time in this case.
You're shaking your head.
Well, I just don't see in any way why we are responsible for American domestic policy, which is what this is. Look, I'm as appalled as the next person by what Donald Trump has done, apart from the fact that, look, he said he was going to do this, which is why I didn't think, I certainly personally did not want Americans to vote for him. He said he was going to do this. In fact, what he's implemented is much less than what he said he would do when he was campaigning. I always feared that the campaign Trump was the real Trump, and that's what's proved to happen. The reality is that what he's done is, as far as I can tell from what I've read, is actually constitutional. He has the executive power to issue this executive order. It is within the rules in terms of a class of aliens and a class of aliens deemed to be a risk to the United States. Now, it's a 90-day limited ban. The last president who did this was actually a Democrat president, President Carter. Whether or not we
he did it in the aftermath of the Iranian
you could argue,
crisis.
given the spate of terror attacks on American territory and plots in recent years, that he may well feel justified. I'm not saying it's right. I don't agree with Donald Trump. However, it
of
is
the
not the
7
position.
countries he's banned, of people from these countries being involved in terrorist attacks.
This is the absurdity. No, exactly. And he hasn't included Saudi Arabia, Egypt,
what's
or
the analogy
Pakistan.
with Iran under Carter then?
The last president who did this, I don't remember everyone getting in such a state about it when he did that. The reality is, it is a legal thing for him to do. I don't like it. It's not my country. It's not my constitution. And neither is it Theresa May's.
If it's legal, because they have been given temporary right to remain by both a federal district judge in Brooklyn and another district judge.
It's a different issue for people with green
Alexandria.
cards. No, it's an absurdity for him to argue it's about security and vetting with people who've already got green cards, people who've already got status in America. By definition, they've gone through the vetting. So that's an absurdity. I don't agree with this. However, I don't think it's reasonable to then say that Theresa May, because she had her hand taken by Donald Trump and wants to do a deal with him and wants him to join her in leading the free world, I don't think it's reasonable to then say she has to agree with every one of his policies. It's a nonsense.
No, but the issue, Jan, and I would suggest, is not whether she needs to agree with them. The question is, she'll be questioned about them all the time now. And although these are matters of domestic policy, they have refugee policy is international. They speak to values. They speak to issues that affect Britain as well. And I would suggest she will not get away with this anonymous statement from Downing Street. People will demand that she says something on the record.
She won't get away with it indefinitely. These situations will recur. Every time Donald Trump says or does something contentious, she will be pressed to disassociate her administration from his. She'll probably be in a better logistical situation to do so. And what I mean is that she has spent a big chunk of the past 72 hours in the air. You know, she flew from Washington to Ankara, then from Ankara to London. We don't have Air Force One. We don't have those frictionless communications with the ground. She would have just been incommunicado for large periods of time when the story was breaking. That doesn't excuse the stiff response when she landed and issued a statement via Downing Street. But during that delay, I think she did have a plausible excuse. She's also got a much more tricky geopolitical situation than many other world leaders. She has to strike a favourable trade deal with a new US president. It's all very well people saying, well, Justin Trudeau of Canada was much more vociferous in his criticism of Donald Trump. He's already in NAFTA. He's not striking a new deal with...
For how long, we don't know.
Well, exactly. He's trying to stay in NAFTA. Right. But he's in a much less tricky situation, I think, than she is.
Now, Theresa May was the first foreign leader to meet President Trump. The visit was seen as quite a coup for the Prime Minister, keen, as Janan was saying, for a new trading relationship with America in the wake of Brexit. The Prime Minister congratulated the new US President for his, quote, stunning election victory, but might not have intended to be pictured walking through the White House with him, hand in hand. That picture of Donald Trump helping Theresa May down the steps through the White House colonnade will be the enduring image of the Prime Minister's brief visit. Mrs May said the President told her he was 100% behind NATO. And for her part, the Prime Minister said she would work hard to make sure other NATO countries increase their defence spending to the promised 2% of GDP. It's been announced there will be a new trade negotiation agreement with high-level talks starting straight away. The hope is this will lead to a new trade deal between the two countries as soon as Britain leaves the EU. Mr Trump said he believed Brexit's going to be a wonderful thing. On Russia, Theresa May made clear to Donald Trump her continued backing for sanctions. And following the controversy over the president's support for torture, Mr Trump said he would defer to his Secretary of Defense, General James Mattis, who argues the practice doesn't work. And I'm joined now by the former UKIP leader, Nigel Farage. Welcome back to the programme. Do you agree with Mr Trump's decision to bar Syrian refugees indefinitely from entering the United States?
I agree with the concept called democracy, a point that appears to be missed by almost all commentators, and especially, could I say, with the BBC. He was elected to get tough. He was elected to say he would do everything within his power to protect America from infiltration by ISIS terrorists. Now, there are 7 countries on that list. He's entitled to do this. He was voted in on this ticket.
I didn't ask you if he was entitled. That's not my point of contention. I asked you if you agreed with it.
Well, I do, because I think that if you just look at what is happening in France and Germany, if you look at Mrs Merkel's policy on this, which was to allow anybody in virtually from anywhere, look what it's led to.
But you said in 2013 there's a responsibility on all of us in the free West to try and help some of those people fleeing Syria, literally in fear of their lives.
Well, that's right. The Christian community in many of those countries has virtually now been... It's almost too late, because most of them have now been wiped out. But I did make the point that if you're looking for a genuine definition of a refugee, all right, we go all the way back to 1951, it is somebody who is in direct fear of persecution all their life because of their race, religion,
But you
or
didn't
beliefs.
talk about only Christians. And in January 2014, you then said, I seem to recall that it was UKIP who started the debate on allowing Syrian refugees. You seem to be in favour of allowing proper refugees into this country.
If they can be defined.
But now you support Mr. Trump, who won't let any in.
Well, Mr. Trump is running American policy, not British policy. And again, I think we need to distinguish between these two things. I mean, frankly, since I made those comments, we had the Merkel madness, all right? And I think that Trump's policy, in many ways, has been shaped by what Mrs. Merkel did. He's fully entitled to do this. And as far as we're concerned, in this country, yes, I would like to see extreme vetting.
Since 9/11, and including 9/11, can you name any terrorist event in the United States that has involved refugees who've been allowed into the country?
No, in fact, the terrorist events that have happened in America have been US citizens who've been radicalized whilst in America.
Not refugees?
No. But when you've got a problem already, why on earth would you wish to add to it? And I would remind you that of the 8 people that committed those atrocities in Paris, 5 of them had got into Europe posing as refugees. So,
Yes.
so there is an issue here.
There is, but perhaps not for America, because America has the most rigorous and lengthy refugee screening process in the world, especially for Syrians. You have to register with the UN Agency for Refugees. That agency then recommends certain names to America. They then have to go through biometric screening, database screening, intelligence screenings, including 4 separate intelligence agencies screen you. Each one not allowed to talk to the other. Only one, if one comes out against you, you don't get in. Indeed, you're banned for life. How more rigorous would you want it to be?
It's much more rigorous than we are, or the rest of Europe is.
So what's the need for a ban?
This is why we have elections, Andrew. We have elections so that voters can make choices. And they voted for Donald Trump to become president, and he said he would put bans in place and then move towards extreme vetting. Now, as far as Syria is concerned, he's made that decision. But that's what he was voted in for. And I really can't quite understand.
But I'm asking how, since you know him, you've met him, you're a confidant of his, I'm testing you on the logic of it. Not that he's democratically elected. I'm not asking you about that.
The logic
I'm trying
of it
to get the case, particularly since if you take the 7 countries on which the ban applies it's for 90 days, again, of these 7 countries, its citizens have not been involved in terrorist attacks in the United States.
And of course, it would be a mistake to say that it's just Muslim countries, because the biggest Muslim countries in the world, of course, have not been included in this. Look, the point is, they have made this assessment. They bought themselves 90 days to think about the policy. This is exactly what Trump's voters would have wanted him to do.
You once said that the president's rhetoric on Muslims and immigration made, quote, even you feel, quote, very uncomfortable.
Because he started off by saying there would be a total ban, as if it was forever, and he then amended it to say that there would be some vetting. Now, as far as Syria is concerned, my guess is that what he's going to do is to try and genuinely help Syrian people, and he will be talking about the creation of some safe zones. Let's see.
Oh, he hasn't. But that was taken out of the executive order.
Well, we will see. We will see. I suspect something like that is coming down the track.
What advice did you give to the president and his advisors ahead of Theresa May's visit?
That I wanted us to talk about trade, and that I wanted to give the Prime Minister the impression that actually, when she's been surrounded for a whole career by civil servants and politicians who say that everything takes 5 years, or 7 years, or 10 years, to make it clear to the Prime Minister that actually, if there's will, these things can be done quickly.
But isn't there a great danger for a British Prime Minister who has to deal with the President of the United States? Realpolitik, I understand that. But to ally herself so closely with such an unpredictable, such a controversial president banning Muslims in certain ways and refugees, building a wall with Mexico, threatening trade wars with other countries, thinking of ending sanctions against Russia?
I'm really missing something here. What is controversial about defending the Mexican border? I mean, Bill Clinton spoke in very tough terms about this. George Bush built 600 miles of fence, and because it's Trump, there's uproar. I find this extraordinary.
So you think there's no risks for a British Prime Minister in being the best friend of this particular
I think there is
president?
absolutely no risk in putting together a trade deal, and there is absolutely no risk in her being the bridge between America and the rest of NATO to say to NATO members, if you don't pay your 2%, he's serious. So no, on those things, there's no risk at all.
It was clear from her Lancaster House speech that the Brexiteers in the government had won pretty much every argument in terms of the negotiations to come out. What do you want from her now that she hasn't given you on Brexit?
Delivery. She was very good as Home Secretary. Do you remember those wonderful speeches? Tory party conferences, the Tory press saying this was the new Thatcher, and actually she failed completely and utterly. She even failed to control immigration from outside the European Union. So yes, it was a good speech, and it was for many of us on the Eurosceptic side of the argument, I mean, I could scarcely believe.
Well, she gave you everything.
I could scarcely believe that a British Prime Minister was saying things for which I had been roundly abused and vilified. But I have a feeling we may be in for a very frustrating 2017. The mood, as I can see it in Brussels, is that negotiating with Britain is not a priority. They're far more worried about Dutch elections, French elections, German elections, and possibly even Italian elections. And I worry that by the end of this year, we may not have made very much progress. Now, that is why the Trump visit suddenly brings things into focus. What if, and we've agreed to start these talks immediately, what if, by the middle of June, for argument's sake, the Americans say, OK, we've reached this position with the British, we've compromised on the tough stuff, food standards and things like that, we're ready to sign a deal now. And then May has to say, well, actually, Mr. Juncker says, I can't sign this until we leave.
Oh, you can't.
Well, you can. I mean, what could they do to us? They can't throw us out. We're leaving anyway.
No, but everyone agrees, including the government, that you can talk about a deal, though there's some doubt about that. You could maybe even do a heads of agreement. But you cannot sign a treaty until we've left the EU.
Well, let me predict that by the end of this year, we will find a European Union who frankly don't want to talk to us, and we'll find countries all around the world that want to get on and do things. And that is going to be, I think, the big tension for May over the course of this year.
But if the Prime Minister is giving you everything you want on Brexit, I take the point about delivery, but at least you agree that she is trying to get, from your point of view, the right things. If she does deliver on that, if she gets Brexit on the terms of which you approve, what's the point of UKIP?
Oh, you could argue that about any political party. Parties are formed, and if we've achieved, the goal that we set out to achieve, there are right now out there 4 million people who are absolute UKIP loyalists. They are delighted that by voting UKIP, we got a referendum. They'll be even happier if they see us leave the European Union. And I think there is still a huge gap in British politics for a party that says it as it sees it, is unafraid by political correctness, and is seen to be on the side of the little people. And that's why, with the Labour Party as fundamentally split, and it really is, totally split, over this European question, I think UKIP's in good shape.
Well, that proposition will be put to test at the Stoke Central by-election. It's one of UKIP's best prospects in the country, however you cut it. Some people call it the capital of Brexit. Labour's in chaos over Article 50, as you've pointed out. It's picked a candidate to fight Stoke Central who's described Brexit as a pile of merde, I use the French word. The Tories don't seem to be trying. They've got their eyes on Copeland. If your successor, Paul Nuttall, who is fighting this seat, if he can't win the Stoke by-election, there's not much hope for you, is there?
Well, I think he will. I've always been told never make predictions, but I like making predictions. I think Paul will win Stoke.
And if he doesn't?
If he doesn't, it'll be tough. If he doesn't, we'll still have our 4 million loyalists. If he does, then we can actually see that Labour are beatable in their heartlands, and I think UKIP will be off to the second very big stage of its history.
Nigel Farage, thank you for being with us.
I've been getting away with it.